going on, everyone? Chris with Journals, Comics, and Pop Culture. This is our top 10 hottest selling comics of the week, our weekly video series brought to you by PopCultureZone.com. Before we get into this week's top 10 books, don't forget to check out PopCultureZone.com's. Their links are below. Check them out if you're interested in getting your hands on some awesome exclusive and incentive variants at affordable costs, CGC slabs, and of course all different kinds of pop culture items, including toys and statues. And if you're buying raw books, they ship at a flat rate fee of only $4.99. Pop Culture Zone is also on eBay, where they still hold a 100% customer feedback rating with over 8,000 ratings this year alone. Those links are below. Check them out and make sure you follow them on eBay as well.
That pick 3, we're going to talk about it. We're going to crunch numbers, and I'm excited about it.
So let's just do it. Get into the top 10 look back props or flops. The top 10 hottest comics of the week based off of Cover Price's list from Monday is at number 10, Invincible Iron Man number 9, the first appearance of Riri Williams, aka Ironheart. At number 9, we have Black Panther number 1 from 1998, the first appearance of Okoye and Nakia. At number 8, we have Incredible Hulk 449, the first Thunderbolts. Nori Jordan, are you here? At number 7, we have Astonishing Ant-Man number 6, the first appearance of Cassie Lang as Stinger. Number 6, we have Avengers 267, the first appearance of the Council of Kangs. At number 5, we have Avengers 268, the Council of Kangs Part 2. At number 4, we have Savage She-Hulk number 1, the first appearance of She-Hulk. At number 3, we have Paper Girls number 1. By the way, guys, I started watching last week. I'm enjoying this show. At number 2, we have X-Men 200. At number 1, Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars number 1. Chris, I like this list. Tony, your thoughts?
I like it. I mean, I definitely like the list. Some really good stuff on there. I think a lot of classics. Let's just say there's some good classics there.
By the way, Nori Jordan is here, and he hopes that Hulk 449 isn't a flop. Chris, let's get into that.
Yeah.
449. It's definitely not a flop, though.
No. That's a solid book. I like this list. I'm going to be honest with you guys. You probably know I've been a bit drained on doing these top 10s. Just the same thing every week. Oh, this was optioned. Oh, we got a trailer for this. I will say, though, coming out of San Diego Comic-Con and what Marvel did, and that's why you see everything's Marvel except for Paper Girls number 1. This is where I get behind the hype. This isn't just people sitting with their FOMO like, oh, there was an option or a trailer, so I need to FOMO out and get it because it's going to make me rich, or I need to flip
the next Miles Morales.
Yeah, right. This is like people are sitting here anticipating all of this awesomeness from Marvel over Phase 5 and Phase 6, and it's really just I could get goosebumps talking about it. So when you bring up that list one more time,
you got it.
You see that. We got the Secret Wars announcement. We She-Hulk's coming. We got the Kang Dynasty. I mean, it's going to be huge. We know Thunderbolts are coming. People are just excited about that. The trailer for Black Panther. I mean, how emotional and just God, I just got chills. People are excited for Riri. We got our first look. The ode to Tony in the cave, and so much goodness. So, Paper Girls being up there too, good stuff. Maybe we'll talk about that. I don't know, but let's go into my 3 picks, guys. My number 1, it's actually my number 3 pick is Avengers 267, first appearance of the Council of Kangs. Now, this is a book that I talked about when I do my top 10, sleeper keys to invest in for the MCU or something. This book was something I talked about probably about 2 years ago now almost. And, when it was a $3 to $4 book, and it's been paying off. Now, I want to preface this, guys. Props or flops in these books. This isn't a shopping list, and I'm not going to give it props or flops based on if you should buy it right now. You probably shouldn't buy most of these books right now. You missed out. If you think about the price that they're at, and if they're going to go up in the short term, and if you can flip them, unless you get a really good deal. Let's move that out of the way, and let's just talk about these books. This book had a 100% upward trend in sales. Now, last week when it hit the top 10, the high 9.8 was $350. This week's high, there was none. All right. Now, what does this say in red? Missing data on coverprice.com, because they incorrectly stated that the high sale last week was $299. I love Cover Price. I am a paying member of, but I will tell you guys, with any data source, it could be wrong. They can make mistakes, and you always got to be careful of that. And in this situation, Cover Price made a mistake on the data. So you always got to do your own research, and that's why I do that. Now, here's some context. A 9.8 newsstand sold last week as well for $625. That was a buy it now purchase. Crazy. I'm going to talk about this. There's 94 9.8 copies on the census. The census doesn't differentiate newsstand versus direct, and it should. It absolutely should. When you go and look on eBay sold, there's definitely more 9.8 sold that are direct. This book came out in 1986. You still had roughly a 50-50 market of newsstand versus direct then. So I don't like to put too much hype on newsstand from this age, from this year. But when you talk about 9.8s, that could still be a good argument because, well, even though maybe it was 50-50 on the market, you had a lot of newsstands that were returned for credit and ripped up. And you may not have as many high grades because of how they were treated. So while I can understand a premium going for a newsstand of this, $625 is absolutely nuts, especially for a buy it now. You know what it tells me? It tells me that this wasn't a bidding war where people could maybe set the tone even. This was a random seller saying, I'm going to set it at a price and hopefully somebody takes the bait. And guess what? Somebody took the bait because they needed it now and there's no basis for a fair market value. So guys, if another book, and this is a newsstand 9.8, don't just spend $600 on it because of this sale. Don't do it unless you just want to blow your money. Fine. All right. Last week's average raw, $34 when it hit the top 10. This week, $28. There was also incorrect data on Cover Price with a stated average raw to be 50. That is inaccurate. I went back to that last week and I didn't even accumulate all of the sales from that week. I took the first 5 days and I got a $34 average. If I would have took all 7 days, it would have been lower than $34. So again, this book, while there have been higher sales like within the 60s, probably for near mint raw copies, was never averaging $50. And you got to take average raw with a grain of salt. They're not taking into consideration the grade of the book. You can have one beat up copy that throws it off and sells for $2. You can have one near mint 9.8 potential copy that sells for $80 that throws it off, that skews the average. Be careful, guys. Props or flops for this book. I am going to give this book a absolute props, and this is why. And again, not because you should go pay $350 for it right now. Not because this book may not cool down at some point, because it can. But because I told you guys that this was a solid book to invest in for $4, $5, $6 a year or two ago. And it was, because if you sold it right now, you're making money. Now, I also believe that while we shouldn't put so much into movie speculation, especially for villains, I think Kang is going to be freaking amazing. And while I do feel that this book can continue to spike, It can continue to increase. I do believe that it can absolutely cool off as well. There could be absolute volatility in this book. And again, that's not why I'm giving it props. This book is, in my humble opinion, never going to be a $3, $4, $5 book ever again. And that's why I give this book props.
Tony, real quick, props or flops on Avengers 267.
Oh man, this is a tough one for me, but I think at the end of the day, I think what Chris said is true. I don't think this is ever going to be a $5 book ever again. Even if Kang doesn't do well in the MCU, I don't see it ever going back down to that level. I give it a props. I give it a props. I think this definitely is going to have some staying power. And of course, if Kang does well in the MCU, forget it. So I think this is a solid props for me.
I'm going to agree with you guys there too. I think it's a props for one statement. Kevin Feige said there will be multiple versions of Kang. That's it. Moving on. What do you got, Chris?
Whew. All right, guys. Second book. My number 2 book is the non-Marvel book, Paper Girls. Paper Girls number 1. Jeff, I binged this. I watched the first episode. What day is it? It's Sunday. I watched the first episode on late night Friday when I came home from being out of town, and I unpacked. And then I lounged all evening after cleaning and unpacking yesterday, and I watched the rest, the whole
good.
I thoroughly enjoyed this show. It was awesome. I don't know if I own this book. I might, because I own a lot of Image number 1s from the last 10 years. I never read it. I was never big on even paying any attention to it. But now I am. Now I'm like, oh man, I want to go read it. Let's look at these numbers. 101% upward trend in sales. Last week's high, CGC 9.8, was 130. This week's was a little lower at 117. But again, don't just look at highs. This book over the last 2 weeks has been trending around the $100 mark for a 9.8, which I think, considering, is still decently affordable. Last week's high raw was 20. This week's was 25. It's been sitting at a $15 to $25 book, in that range, for a long time. Now, this book has been sitting at a roughly $100 9.8 book for a long time as well. It was a little bit over a year ago, I think last spring, when we got the announcement that this book ballooned in a 9.8 for hitting above $200, $250. That right there was FOMO. That right there was the ridiculousness of people thinking, oh, it's a comic book's option. I need to go FOMO and spend hundreds of dollars. And even with the show released, it's still not even hitting what it was at during that time, because it's just unsustainable. All this crazy FOMO over option items, properties, is not sustainable. Even for Marvel stuff, sometimes it's ridiculous. And I've talked about this. But I'm not talking about what happened 16 months ago to this book. I'm talking about what it's doing right now. To me, people aren't FOMOing over this book right now. There is a high supply out there. And quite honestly, I don't see paying $100 for a 9.8 in this book as being extremely horrible, especially with how the 9.8 market has been so crazy. I think that buying this book raw for $15 to $20 is decent too. I love this show. It followed, not to say that it's Stranger Things. It's not Stranger Things at all, but it follows something that Stranger Things did, which is the Goonies-like nostalgia, where you have these young kids going on adventure, sci-fi, even a little bit of horror type suspense. Obviously, it's not a horror show, but you get, that type of suspense with it as well. And it's just overall fun and adventure. And us as, anybody in their 30s or 40s or even older now, like that grew up watching The Babysitter's Club or Goonies, or, even like I mean, just stuff like that, like even E.T. and stuff. Like we can look at these and there's so much nostalgia there. But then you can even be young kids watching this, and this is what's going to be nostalgic to you, 20, 30 years down the line. And they did such a really good job. And because people aren't FOMOing over this book and paying $300 or $400 for a 9.8 of this book, I'm giving it props. I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that this is a book to invest in. It's going to make you rich. No. But I'll tell you, if you're, like I said, if you're into slabs, which I'm not, I will never buy this book in a 9.8. I'll never spend $80, $100, $115 for I have no need. Will I spend $20 for a number one of this book raw? I might. Why not? I'll go buy the trade if I want to read it. But I wouldn't mind. I give this book props just because I think that a lot of people buying this book, there's plenty out there. They're buying it because they're watching the show and they're really enjoying what they're watching. And you can't go wrong with that type of scenario. I cannot give this book a flops, even though it's not an investment book, folks. It's not an investment book. Still giving it props.
All right, Tony, your quick thoughts.
Oh boy. So here's my issue with, first of all, I haven't seen the show. So I don't know. Here's what I would say. I think if the show is good, it puts it in a category with like The Boys, Stranger Things, right? To me, I think, my question is anybody going to care about this 20 years from now? When the shows are over and 10 years go by, is this going to stand the test of time? It's an unknown, right? So
can I answer your question personally? Because I think that your question adds to what I was saying. I will agree. Like, I don't think so. That's why I said this isn't an investment book. There's no staying power in terms of investment. And there's so many out there. But what I do think is that people that own them now or people that find the show later on will find inherent value in the book. And when I say value, I'm not even talking monetary. So
right. Yeah.
But continue on.
And again, to me, it's based on if people like it or not, right? So, buy what you like, right? I mean, so
that's it.
So it's hard for me to really say if it's a flop or a prop, but I'll probably say, man, look, if the show is good, the book is good, I have to give it a prop. I think it'll last a test of time.
Okay, so props for you. Here's my thing, guys. I really enjoy this show. Like, I'm in episode 6, I would say, or 7. I'm really enjoying it. But me personally, I would just buy the digital copy. I'm not gonna buy this. So to spend that kind of money, it's a flop for me. I'm not gonna spend anything over what I would pay for the digital copy. So all of the data that you pulled, Chris, on what it's going for right now, there's no way. And for that reason, it's a flop because, again, I will not collect this book personally. I will read it in the digital format, and that's why. But I really, really enjoy the show. As Chris said, I love the Goonies analogy, the Stranger Things analogy. If you guys are into any of that stuff, also time travel in general, it's fantastic. It is so well done. Acting is superb. Ali Wong, you've never seen her like that. So
let me ask you a question, Jeff. Are you a Goonies fan?
Yeah.
Would you collect Goonies memorabilia?
No.
So
I would get a T-shirt here and there, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Okay, man, what's the comic book that you own from your childhood that you have because of it's another property, like a movie, a TV show, or a cartoon. Do you own a comic book that is something from you, that's a different type of property, a toy property?
Yeah, I'm trying to think, Chris. I am trying to think. I mean, for some reason, I have Toxic Avenger, and I've never been into those films.
I have a point that I'm trying to make here, because, and I know, and Jeff, I know you may think I'm riding your ass right now because
I'm good with it. I'm really trying to think.
I noticed that you often base your props or flops on on your personal preference, and that's perfectly fine. But because you do that, I like to play devil's advocate with you, because remember, I just said, what would I buy? I'd buy the trade.
That's why we need to change this segment. And Tony brought it up, what you love. It's
I wouldn't even, I'm saying $20 for this book is cool if you're enjoying the show and you want it. I wouldn't even pay. I'd buy the trade paperback first, but I still gave it a props. So, and I'm asking you this question because I think, like, if Transformers #1, obviously it's worth a good amount of money.
I would go Transformers.
If Transformers #1 though wasn't like a key book, but there was still like Transformers as a cartoon show still meant something to me, I wouldn't mind paying $20 just to own that book.
I would.
As a nostalgic collector's item. And that's why I said, answer Tony's question too. Yeah. This isn't like an investment book for comic collectors. It's a fun collectible item for people that enjoy the show, that might be willing to drop $20 just so they're like a big Paper Girl fan. They enjoy the show and they have a Paper Girls comic book, something like that. So I think at the end of the day, there's reasons why people are buying this book. And I honestly think that a lot of people buying this book aren't doing it for those investment or FOMO reasons. And because I'll tell you again, if this book shot up to $300 or $400 and a 9.8, I would have given it a flops, because then it tells me that people are buying this book because they're FOMOing on it, thinking that it is of investment value. And I align with the both of you. There is nothing there that tells me that it's going to do that.
Yeah.
Right, again, we need to work on this segment and refine.
Let me just say one thing. The only reason I ever bought the first appearance of He-Man is because I loved the He-Man cartoons when I was a kid. And that's the only reason why I bought the book, right? So look at it now. I didn't buy it for an investment. I bought it because I watched the cartoons and I loved He-Man, and I bought the comic.
I would do that with Transformers. That was a good one to pull out there, Chris. Or G.I. Joe, which I did own that G.I. Joe #1. Anyways, we're not talking about me or my opinion. Your last pick of the week, Chris. What do you got?
All right, guys. My #1 is the #1 book. I like when that happens. Secret Wars #1. More specifically, Marvel superheroes. Secret Wars #1 from 1984, not from 2015. But we know why this book made the list, and I'm excited for it. Let's look at the numbers. 122% upward trend in sales because we got an announcement of an Avengers Secret Wars. It's official. Super hyped. Last week's high, 9.8. After we got that announcement, when it hit the top 10 list, $1,050. A 9.8 newsstand sold that same week for $11.99, not much more. This week's high, CGC 9.8, sold for $850. When we're looking at the high values, that is a 19% a decrease in value. But what do I always say? Don't get caught up on highs, guys. That 1050 was a little bit of an outlier. There were a couple more that hit in the 900s, but look, a little bit of FOMO there once we got that announcement, because it's a huge announcement. So I could see a few bidding wars and then people kind of cooling off over the next week and it kind of settling down. I don't look at an 850 to a 1050 as being some huge drop at all. It's just a couple of sales right after the announcement where people just were willing to pay a little bit more. There's a lot of books. There's a good amount of these books out there. 850 is a solid value right now. And we can see kind of what's been going on with the average raw, 45 next to 42 this week, trending kind of in a similar state. So this is another book that I've talked about on, keys to invest in. I think like last year, I think when it had a fair market value of like $20, an average fair market value of $20, it's since then seemingly doubled in price when you consider average. And again, you got to take averages with a grain of salt. But I know, again, ebb and flow will happen on spec books, even with MCU stuff. We saw what happened with Thanos' first appearance, a decent drop after Endgame. It's gone back up. It's been going back up in a very healthy manner. Even with the downturn of the market. Why? Because it's a key book. It's a Bronze Age key, and those characters are awesome, and they'll always be there in the MCU. And we always have that as part of our comic book culture in history. I think the same thing's going to happen with Secret Wars. I think this is going to be something that's going to, be a standing event, both in cinematic terms and in books. And I'll say this again, I do believe it's going to incorporate some of the 1984 and some of the 2015 story arcs. So I think that this book's bump in demand is absolutely valid. Now, it's probably some ways out still. We could see this book cool off. Is this a good time to buy? Not saying that. You might want to chill. Haste makes waste. Be patient. Once we get a trailer or maybe we get a confirmation of casting of the Beyonder, this book is going to be selling for more than it is right now. So you never know. I give this book, and Jeff, this might be the first time we've ever done this, giving this book a props.
Woo! Hat trick.
Yep, all props. Because here's the thing, like I said, though, guys, be careful. We're in a volatile time with this book. It could cool, but it could spike again once we get any type of announcement. And once the movie comes out, it could take a good, decent dip. But I do believe that this is a solid, long-term investment. I believe whatever happens in the next few years, the ups and downs, the ebb and flow, the volatility, in 10 years' time, it's going to recoup all of that. So even if you buy it at a high and it dips down after the movie's release, 10 years from then, I think you're going to recoup that cost and it's going to set new floors. I do believe this. It's just my humble opinion. But be careful. I wouldn't buy 9.8. Say that all the time. I want to buy no book at a 9.8. Go find yourself a high raw and try to get a 9.8. Press it, clean it. But give this book a props. I'm so excited for a Secret Wars film. 3 props, man.
Tony.
Yeah, this is a no-brainer for me. This is a solid props. I mean, number one, I remember I was 13, 14 years old working in a comic shop. And when this series came out, it was like the greatest thing to ever happen on Earth. I mean, the story, all these heroes together. I mean, to me, it's always been, to me, one of those iconic books to me, because before that, there was never really anything like that happened. I mean, when you have an ensemble like that. So, one other thing too, Chris, is I think you'll agree with me here. Why it's a solid props is because this book to me doesn't need a movie, right? Yeah. Because look, after all these years, this book has steadily gone up.
Yep.
I mean, it's never gone down. It's just steadily, little by little, up every year. And whether there's a movie or not, it's still going to go up every year. Yeah. So, to me, it's just, it's a solid prop.
And we're gonna get the hat trick here too. It's complete props for me. Like, it's iconic. I think it really, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of brought in the events series, right? The big events, right? So it laid the groundwork for what they are now, which are annoying right now. They're all over the place, but it's amazing. But for me, the toys, just having memory of those toys, of they had little hologram shields or whatever they were. Like, I loved everything about it. And like, again, Chris, I'm going with my personal, like, preference. I'm not going to spend that much money on a 9.8, no way. But man, I would. What were we looking at for a Raw here, guys?
Yeah, around 40 on average. But some of the highs, there was a couple highs there was one that hit over 100. I didn't even compute it in the average because it's such an outlier. But there were some that were hitting in the 80s, a couple. You're thinking high grade on average, probably anywhere from 50 to 60 right now. So
interesting, Mark Lineker. So Secret Wars was an answer to the superpowers from DC, which I remember those toys vividly. I freaking love those, all of those toys. So fascinating stuff. Chris, you did an excellent job once again dissecting the top 10 hottest comics of the week's props or flops, the look back.